So now that we've learned how to track our calories, we're going to go a little bit further down the rabbit hole for part 3. We're going to first off talk about what are macronutrients, and then we'll be going into what specifically you should be eating. There are a total of 3 macronutrients. So they are fats, carbs, carbohydrates, right? And protein. And the reason why we call them macronutrients is because those are the 3 nutrients in our body that we need the most and that helps us to function and exercise properly. You've probably already heard of what macronutrients are, so the fats, protein, and carb. But in this part of the video, we'll go into depth with how you can adjust the amount of carbs, protein, and fats that you're eating so you can improve your performance. The first macronutrient we'll talk about today is protein. So lots of people have been talking about protein these days, in that they say you've got to eat lots of protein after you exercise so that you can rebuild your muscle, protein everywhere. And whilst that's true, you do have to eat a bit of protein. It's not very specific in that what type of protein should you be eating, when, and how much. So as I've already explained in part 1, when you exercise and put your muscles under stress, your muscles actually form little tears. And what protein does is it brings nutrition into your body, and it allows your body to form these things called amino acids. And when it forms that amino acid stuff, it gives it to your muscles, and that's how it rebuilds into more and stronger and bigger muscles. If you don't have enough protein, your body won't be able to produce those amino acids, and so the effect of rebuilding those muscles through muscle protein synthesis won't be as big or as beneficial to you as if you ate the right amount of protein. So then the question comes up, how much protein should you be eating? An article from the Journal of the International Society of Sports Nutrition says that the optimal amount of protein you should be having is 0.4 grams per kilogram per meal per day. So when you take that as a daily amount, you should be having a total of 1.6 grams per kilogram per day. So what does that mean? Putting it simply, if you weigh in at 50 kilograms, you'd want to be having around 80 grams of protein a day. Anything more than, say, 110, let's refer to the study here, won't really help you, because all the other protein that you have in the day won't be used towards healing your muscles and growing your muscles. It'll just be used as another form of energy. Protein is quite easy to get from foods like meat, eggs, and nuts and dairy. So make sure, along with your other foods, to track how much of each food you're eating. And so at the end of the day, you would know exactly how much protein you've had. Some other sources of protein include whey, which is a supplement. You can also have protein bars. But overall, you'd want to try and get your protein from more natural sources and less processed sources. That's just a little bit healthier for you in the long term. For my diet, I do have whey protein because at my weight, I've got to eat so much protein in a day, and I find it a little bit hard to get that all through food. So at the end of the day, or say before a workout, I'd have my milk and whey supplement, and that'd help me reach my protein goal for the day. So if you're a little bit lighter than me, which I assume you would be, you wouldn't need to have as much protein in the day to grow and strengthen your muscles. So that means you can rely a little bit more on food instead on supplements. One thing to know is that you should be splitting up your protein intake throughout meals. So you shouldn't be having, say, all of your protein in one sitting, because your body won't actually use all of that protein to help you. So the ideal amount is 0.4 grams per kilogram per meal, and you spread that over 4 meals and you get 1.6 grams per kilogram per day. So again, if you're 50 kilograms, you'd want to be hitting around 20 grams of protein every meal for 4 meals. That is also the minimum amount. So 1.6 grams per kilogram per day, that's the minimum. The upper limit though, so the most amount of protein you should be eating in a day would be 2.2 grams per kilogram per day. So if we divide that by 4 again for 4 meals in a day, we get 0.55 grams per kilogram. So if you're 50 kilograms, that would mean that you're around 27.5 grams per meal. How would you know how much protein you're having? Again, this goes back to part 2, where we learned how to track our calories. In these calorie tracking apps, you'll also have the figures for how much protein, fats, and carbs that food contains. And because of that, tracking your calories isn't only good because you're tracking calories, but it's also good because you can figure out your macros, so your macronutrients, and especially that protein, which we're all looking to eat more of. Next up, we have fats. So when you think of fats, normally you think, oh, it's not very healthy and fats cause you to get fat. This is what most people say, but fats actually help you to produce the right type of hormones which help your body grow and develop and maintain proper function. And it also helps your body to absorb the important vitamins and minerals that your body needs to develop as well. In short, fats are good for you. Let's get a little bit deeper into that and explore why. The main reason why people say that fats can cause you to get fat is because of this rule of thumb. So fats, for every gram of fat that you have, it costs you 9 calories. So you'll be having 9 calories for every gram of fat that you have. The other 2 macronutrients stay at 4. So for every gram of protein and carbs that you have, you'll be having 4 calories for each. So if someone's eating a lot of high-fat food, they will be having more calories as compared to high protein or high carb food. And that is the reason why people say it's bad. But you and I both know now that eating fat is not the unhealthy thing, but it's eating over your calorie limit, your calorie target, which causes you to get fat, and eating the wrong types of fat. Here I've got some Greek style yogurt, and let's look at the nutrition information. I'll read it to you and we'll put it up on the screen. So the total calories that this has per 150 gram serving is 192 calories. So of that, the macros are this: 7.4 grams of protein, 14.6 grams of fat, and 8.3 grams of carbs. So let's times the protein by 4, the carbs by 4, and times the fat by 9, and let's see how many calories comes up. It should be 192 or around thereabouts. Especially if you're younger and still developing, fats are very good for you if you have the right type of fats. So these are fats from foods like salmon, nuts, fatty cuts of meat, and dairy. Remember again, fats are 9 calories per gram, and the other 2 macros are 4 calories per gram. This means you can eat a smaller proportion of high-fat foods and still get the same amount of calories compared to if you eat a bigger portion of calorie or protein-rich foods. So if I haven't said already in this video, I'm currently bulking, and something that I've realized during this 7 to 8 month period is that eating takes so much time. I have to schedule out time in my calendar and say, okay, from 12 to 12:30 to honestly 12 to 1 o'clock, I'm gonna eat my food, eat my lunch. And on that, what I've found is that, say, eating 1,000 calories can take a short amount of time or a long amount of time, depending on what type of food you eat. So not all foods are the same, of course you know that, but the insight here is some foods you can eat really quickly and still get 1,000 calories, whereas some foods will take you like an hour or an hour and a half to eat because it's just such a dense food, but it's not fast to eat. To put this simply, I would only need to eat 140 grams of mixed nuts to eat 1,000 calories. But if I wanted to eat that in white bread, I'd have to eat almost 400 grams of white bread. So 140 grams compared to 400 grams of white bread. Those both give me 1,000 calories, but one is a lot faster and easier to eat than the other, which I'd probably die if I ate that much bread. I'm not saying that I'd do any of that in a normal situation, but knowing how much calories you're eating and where your macronutrients lie when you track them, it will let you eat and choose to eat better foods and foods that also you can eat faster as well. Here's the tip for the end of this part. If you want to eat quicker and eat more food, prioritize having higher fat, higher protein foods, and try and stay away from those carby foods because those usually take a long time to eat. Lastly, we have carbs. So the full name is carbohydrates. And for a long time, we have all believed that carbs are really good for us and they help us to give us energy to the muscles and perform better. And so one place where you'd see carbs at a very, very, very large amount is when you're doing this thing called carb loading. Now, lots of endurance athletes do carb loading because the thought is by eating lots of carbs, I'm gonna smash and squish all of that glucose that you get from carbs into the muscles. And that way, when I do the exercise the next day or the 2 days after I do the carb loading, I would be able to perform better and my muscles would run for longer before they fatigue. The reason that this happens is because the thought is that your muscles use this thing called ATP to produce work, and ATP is produced through, one way of it is through glucose. To put it simply, when you eat carbohydrates, your body will turn it into this type of sugar called glucose. Blood sugar is basically how much sugar or glucose is in your blood. So the more carbs you eat, the more chance you have of spiking up your blood sugar really high. And I guess the less you eat, the more moderate your blood sugar will spike. To move the glucose into your muscles for burning and using, your body will produce this thing called insulin. So insulin is a type of hormone which says, all right, I'm gonna link to the glucose, the ball of glucose, and then push it to the muscles. If the muscles don't see the insulin attached to the glucose, then it'll say, nah, I'm good, I don't want to use you. That doesn't make sense, I'm not going to use it. But if the insulin is attached to the glucose, molecule, and it sends it to the muscle will be like, all right, I'll take you because you have insulin and glucose together. A common thing that happens when you have carbs, but then you don't exercise, is that your body will produce lots of insulin, which is called, let's have a look, hypoglycemia, right? Or your body won't produce enough insulin, which is called hyperglycemia. So it's the same thing as hypothermia and hyperthermia. It's like one's low, one's high. It could pretty much go either way, depending on how your body reacts to it. This means in both cases that you'll be left feeling a bit tired and fatigued. And that is pretty much the reason why if you have lots of carbs, maybe like half an hour to an hour later, you'll feel pretty sleepy and fatigued. The leading reason behind that is because if you don't have enough blood sugar in your body, your brain also won't be able to use that. And so if your brain doesn't have blood sugar, it'll be like, oh, I'm so tired. I need to sleep and regain that blood sugar level by sleeping. From knowing this information through my research, I've tried this out. So I've tried to not eat carbs in the morning. And what I've found is that my brain stays super sharp and I'm able to concentrate very, very astutely into one point of effort. So if I'm trying to, say, do a uni assignment, I do it before I eat so that I can focus the most of my energy and my brain power in the morning and do it, rather than do it at night when my blood sugar is a bit higher because I would have eaten food. This is opposed to when I used to eat carbs in the morning, or honestly, when I still do eat carbs in the morning, I'll notice that I feel a lot more tired, say an hour or two down the line when I'm out about doing my stuff. And that would really affect my ability to do good work in the morning. And so that was pretty difficult. So to sum this part up, if you're a student or if you're a knowledge worker, so you use your brain to do work, you would benefit a lot from staying away from the carbs if you're not doing physical activity. So say you're about to go to school, for breakfast you wouldn't want to have lots of bread and chocolate spread or whatever, because those contain lots of carbs. And when those carbs start to kick in, your body won't use it, and so then your blood sugar will tank and you'll be like, shit, well, I'm feeling pretty tired. And then when your brain's tired, you won't be able to do good work, and so that's no good. What this means is that you will have to work twice as hard, right? You have to focus twice as hard to get the same amount of work done if you're under the influence of like being tired because you ate a lot of carbs. Not eating carbs or just eating less of it won't immediately make you a smarter person or a more productive person. It's just like thinking you're running a marathon and you have a 10-kilo weight around your ankles. And then you come to me and you're saying, oh, well, how do I run faster? What shoes should I have? What shoes should I wear to make me go faster? First of all, you've got two 10-kilo weights around your ankle and you're asking me, what shoes should I wear? So you want to get smarter, you want to do better work in the morning, but you're still disadvantaging yourself by eating carbs and slowing your brain down when you're not going to use those carbs for any physical activity. So first of all, figure out what's slowing you down instead of figuring out how do I go faster. That's kind of one way to figure things out. So after I've given you this information, you might be thinking, oh, well, should I even be eating carbs at all? My thoughts are that carbs have a place in everyone's diet, but only at certain times. So for example, when you're about to exercise, I have no doubts that carbs will help you exercise better because it'll increase your blood sugar, and from that your body will send all that glucose or the glycogen into your muscles, and that will help you train better. But the only issue is that when you eat carbs, when you're not about to exercise, that'll affect your ability to think properly. And of course, I know that a lot of people that would be watching this video are athletes and students, and you need to use your brain when you're not training. But when you use your brain, you need to make sure that it's sharp and focused, and eating carbs before you do that won't help you out. So the rule is around 1 to 2 hours before you're going to train pretty hard, have carbs. Have carbs that are more unrefined as opposed to refined carbs. And that's the difference between like sugary foods versus more like whole grain and plant-based type of foods. So far we've discussed the macronutrients, so our proteins, our fats, and our carbs, and now we arrive at what foods you should eat in a holistic sense. So you know about the macros, now what type of food should you be eating? So the overall thinking that I've come up with is 2 questions. So run all your food through these 2 questions, ask the questions and say yes or no, and then make your decision from there. So first up, does the food have an ingredients list? So if you look at the back of the packaging, how many different ingredients are there? And some of them might even be like pretty weird looking. So say you're having, I don't know, like chicken fingers, you'd look at it and be like, all right, it's got like 60% chicken, like breading, like preservative, some spices and whatever. And it just looked like a big list of ingredients, but you're only having chicken. So if that's the case, you look at it and you'd be like, all right, chicken fingers, let me just eat chicken instead. That's only one ingredient, and that's a lot less complex for your body to digest than it is to digest all those other ingredients. Second is, does that food have more carbs than it does have protein or fats? So if that's the case, you want to ask yourself the secondary question to that: am I training in the next 1 to 2 hours? If you are going to train in the next 1 to 2 hours, then by all means have the carbs, but just make sure it's not from like sugary things and like processed foods, because that will obviously not be very healthy for you. Instead, opt for things like whole grain foods and like meats, nuts, dairy, things that again are ingredients. Up on the screen, I'll put up a list of some foods that are good and why they are good for you. First up, we have chicken, so specifically chicken breast, beef, salmon, lamb, and tuna, so pretty much all the meats. Next up, we have all the nuts. So like get the mixed nuts in a bag, like macadamias, almonds, pistachios, cashews, all that is all good, it's all yummy. Next, you have rice. This isn't actually too good, but I find that if I have rice before training, I'll have a really good session. If you want to get a better type of carb, look into unrefined carbs. These will give you less energy up front, but it will spread it out for longer. Eggs, these are just nice when you cook them in butter. Very, very yum. Next up, you have like your dairy, so cheese, milk, and butter. So these foods should only really have 2 to 3 ingredients on the back at maximum. Next, you have your potatoes, so sweet potatoes and olive oil and like your plant-based oils, like avocado oil is good as well. Finally, you have water. So that's another thing I'll get to in a separate video, but just drink water. You don't really have to have too much else unless it's like juice. So you've come to the end of this full guide, and at this point, you should know a lot more about the basics of diet and eating and tracking your food, and how to become a better athlete by doing so. Of course, there's a lot more to learn and a lot more to research, and that's why I think I'll be making a lot more of these videos coming into the future. To make sure that you benefit from this video and the information that I've given you, make sure to go back to each part at the end of each section and look at the actionable steps. Follow those actionable steps immediately if you can, or if you can't do it at the next possible time, you can do it. I like to think this type of information is like those collector cars that rich people have. They'll have very, very nice cars, so very good information, but then they'll choose to keep it in the garage because they're afraid to get it dirty. And so I think of that same as knowing all the information in the world. It's not gonna be useful to you if you don't use it. So just like the fast car, if you don't drive the fast car, it's gonna be the slowest car in the world. So drive the car, use the knowledge, and benefit from it. Now we come to the actionable steps for part 3. First up, keep your protein intake high at around 0.4 grams per kilogram per meal for 4 meals, or 1.6 grams per kilogram per day at the lowest, and 2.2 grams per kilogram per day at the highest. Second is to eat plenty of natural fat. So this isn't from processed food, but from single ingredient foods like nuts, fish, meat, and eggs. So if I asked you what ingredients do you eat, you should be able to remember it all in your head, or better yet, count them on your fingers. I'm also trying to get to that point, so not everyone's perfect. Reduce your carb intake when you're not about to train by increasing your proportions of meat, eggs, nuts, and dairy, and other high-fat, single-ingredient foods. Before you're about to train though, do eat your carbs because it will help you push a bit more energy into your muscles. So specifically, you'd want to try and eat your unrefined carbs. So that's your grains, beans, and fruits, so that the blood sugar is released a little bit slower in your body. Point 4 is to cut out those processed foods. One way to easily figure out if it's processed is to ask yourself, does this food have an ingredients list? If it does, it's most likely processed, and usually it's not too good for your body. You want to be eating those foods that don't have an ingredients list because, of course, it's only one food. Last but not least, track your food through a fitness app. Remember this from part 2 because when you track your food, you'll know exactly whether you're having the right amount of protein, carbs, and fat every day, and you'll be able to improve or continue doing the right things. Thanks for staying to the end. Make sure to subscribe if you found it useful, and I'll be making a lot more videos like this coming up. So stay tuned. I'll see you next time.